Yeah. Lovely. So just sitting for a few moments without moving or finding a good sitting position. You can try this one where you're a long way forward. I'm right on the front of the chair here, slightly tilted forward with a little bit of pressure in the soles of my feet. Aware of what's supporting me. So obviously the chair and the floor, but your hips, buttocks, lower back in contact with the chair, feet are in contact with the floor, so your legs supporting the weight of your upper body. And I'm feeling really all the way through your upper and lower body that your skeleton is coming into a position where it can support you without having to strain. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. And then over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And on the other side. Up past your chest. Your belly. And finally, your legs. Sit back in your chair and just recognize as you sit back and you're um, you know, settling into the chair, you realize how it feels to be supported by something. Obviously, this is something from outside, but you can feel the contact with the chair and how it's there, and you don't need to hold yourself in any particular way. Get that feeling of your weight sinking into the chair through the back where it's in contact with the chair, through hips or buttocks. Where they're in contact with the chair. So you start through your heels in contact with the floor. So that the soft tissue of your body, the muscles and tendons and ligaments, internal organs, um, just all the internal structures really are themselves beginning to be able to release tightness because we recognize that support, and just notice any changes maybe in your breathing. Sometimes we can get a feeling of say tingling or heat in our fingertips, for instance. None of these things are definitive, shall we say, because they may differ from time to time for us. Certainly differ between one person and another. Then coming back to the upright position, stepping in again. Remember, if you are a long way forwards, you're not stuck in that position. You can always move back, get a little bit of support from your back. Try and still to feel the support from your feet, but it's not worth straining in your back. We've got a very strong feeling of settling downwards, feeling as though the hips are sinking into the chair, and then turning your head slowly. Try and move in such a way, maintaining your posture that it feels like the movements that you're making require hardly any effort. They just naturally flow. And then hands down by your sides, arms rotating in the shoulder joint. And then winding around. And then back the other way. Just soften your fingers, wrists, and elbows. And rest your hand. Tilting your pelvis so your weight goes forwards. Pushing against the ground with chill. Pushing into the ground through your feet. Bring yourself back up. This movement bringing ourselves back up is actually very difficult to do correctly because we're so inclined to sort of jump and 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 pull ourselves up. The legs push, our hips sink down and do exert a pull on our shoulders, but the pull they exert is back and downwards, not up, because your hips are down here. Obviously, it's a bit like a pulley that you might pull down to raise a blind. And then turn a little, moving over towards one leg, back to the opposite hip. And then in the other direction. And then going around, turning in the center of your body, moving your pelvis, rolling around a little bit on the chair and your weight moving in accordance with that. One hip to another, one foot to another, between feet and hips, varying patterns. And then go back the other way. Come back to the center. And then step out, heel toes, so you've got a nice contact with the ground. And on the other side, good. So maintaining the important elements of the basic posture, the spaciousness, the root, the support, the the freedom of movement that comes with that is really quite hard to maintain in motion. It's always going to be the same. So we try and try and observe the movement and get a sense of what works for you and what doesn't, and the things that work for you. Just sort of to maybe label and file away for future reference. Hands down to your sides and turning palm forwards this time, combining this rotating movement with the transfer of our weight. This is bird folded weight. This time we're going to change to fisherman castanet. Just leave your hands facing back. Move back behind your shoulders, forwards behind your shoulders. Just notice the movements in shoulders, sides, and upper back as your arms swing. And then this time, as you go forwards, imagine a ball behind your arms so that as your feet push down, your hips drop back, your arms are drawn over without straining in your shoulders. All you really should feel here is that at this point here, as your hips start to drop back and before your hands move, there's a little bit of a kind of extension. I won't even call it a stretch. Very gentle, lengthening through your back, through your arms, through your fingers, and then everything contracts at one and the same time. So you're drawn inwards towards your center. One more time, going forwards and up. And this time, again, a very simple change. Turn your hands palm in, your chest opening and closing. One more. Pigeon spreads its wings. And then, very similar in many ways, but your hands coming in a little bit more focused. Elbows do go out a little bit. Pressing forwards, pushing wave. A stronger, more economic movement than the previous one in a way. Do one more of these. And then coming back, hands loosely fisted. Rotating as they go forward. So if you imagine your arm as being like a spring, the movement back is absorbed through the compression of the spring, which means that as you go forward, the spring can then release and push your fist down. One of the interesting models for how we understand how these movements work, how the energy flows, and so on, is to imagine 3 sets of springs in your body. The primary spring in standing, at least, is obviously your feet and your legs. So when you sink down, you're loading the spring again. The second set of springs, or the second spring, is your back and spine, and the third, your arms. This is a good exercise to feel them all working in harmony together. And then open your fist, wind out, back in the circular movement. Don't let your hands come behind the shoulders. It's not this, it's this. Here, you see my hand comes back very, very slightly in front of my shoulders, and then it can come straight in to where it needs to go. I can't do both hands in the chair. So we don't want to get to here and then to wrench the shoulder and have to bring the hand back. One more time. And then turn the hand palm down, polishing the table, introducing the horizontal turning in the middle of your body, hips and waist. One more time. And just rest for a moment. So going back to this 3 springs model, when you press on the spring, it contracts, and then eventually the pressure pushes back up. So I'm just going to show you something. You've never seen me do this before. My little friend here, such a pen holder. But the lovely thing about this is I can do this. And then when I release, tap. So if you think of this as the weight of your head pushing down on the spring, there's already a movement upwards. And also there can be a certain amount of sideways movement here and in this direction. But if I were to go too far, then I'd break the spring. So being careful about that. This is where the sitting posture can be quite useful, because you want to get to a point where you really can feel the weight of your head pressing down, and then there's going to be the movement upwards. Your feet and your hips, as we know, are definitely involved in this. So I was talking about the spine, but really these two, the second and third, first and second spring, compressed and released. Compressed and released. As always, we don't want to get stuck in the imagery. So if it's not working for you, if it's not a useful image at the moment, then don't sort of spend a lot of time trying to make it work. This time change into the wild goose. The third set of springs would be your arms. And it's generally regarded that their numbering are an indication of their significance. The primary spring is your legs, traditionally. Second in importance comes your back and spine, and your arms and hands at the end of the list. In the seated classes, I think there's an argument that says that the spring in your back is at least as important as what's going on in your legs. Part in the clouds. So we want to come back to feel that sort of what I describe as the compression of the spring before we push up. I'm exaggerating this in terms of time scale. Coming back, feeling That your weight dropping into your hips and then the push up. More time. And your hands drop down. Dragon plucks the stars in the sky. So with this one, we could extend that idea of this, the springs into the idea that there's one going all the way up to the side of your body, expanding, contracting, and expanding, and contracting. The dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One last time. And then pushing in two directions, seeing if you can keep a sense of that springiness, but also recognize that no one image, no one idea or memory is ever going to give us the complete story. So these images, like springs, are there to help us access what's going on within the movement. They're not meant to be strict anatomical descriptions or anything like that. It's just kind of images, models that we can maybe get our, our thoughts focused around to give us a kind of way into an understanding of this, feeling of this quality of movement within the body, and to enable us to work with it creatively. This time, extend one foot, just rest on the heel, knee just a little bit bent, scooping the sea. Again, feel your back opening, hips dropping back, drawing the shoulders, almost like you're drawing your shoulders into the chair. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then change into grasping the tiger's ears. Again, sinking down into your hips before you feel the push out. So it's a bit like being on a trampoline or a bouncy castle. You need the downward movement to produce the potential for the expanding movement. Good change sides, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. and grasping the tiger's ear. And with a hollow fist, a loose fist, not tight in your fingers or your wrists. One more time. So we're going to do part of the wild horse's mane, and we'll go through the weight transfer pattern first of all, because the weight transfer leads everything out. Movement in Tai Chi is rooted in the feet, that sinking down, that stability, and that ability to use that to produce an upward movement of pressing down on the springs. So as you move your weight, give yourself time in each position to really settle down. You go from your right hip to your left leg, so a diagonal movement and back. And then there's a little turn that takes you across to your left hip. You go forward in to your right leg and back. And then across again. So it's basically imagine an X shape with a line underneath. You're alternating two directions. So with the arms, following that movement, and of course bringing in the dynamic qualities in backhand arms as much as possible. Hold the ball, go forwards, parting the wild horse's mane. Into your right, forwards into your left foot, back to the right hip, moving across. Trying to follow the movement in your mind's eye. You could pick one particular part of the body to do that with, or you could just identify which are the most sort of dynamic areas at any given point. Focus through those. One last time. And rest for a moment. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Let's do getting the ball in front of the shoulder, because that will follow, in some ways, a very similar pattern to the wild horse's mane. Not quite so much weight movement and not quite so much forward movement, but say you go into your right hip. Once again, you turn towards your left foot, but then you drop back into the left hip. So you go a little bit forwards in the direction of the right foot, back more in to the center, and then shifting across and another way. So as you settle back, both in your back and in your hips and legs, there's this sort of compression, this yielding of the spring. There's not quite so much forwards movement, so your feet aren't quite so much engaged as in the previous exercises. Hands in front of you, forwards into your left, push up. So you're hitting the ball up in front of your shoulder, as the name suggests. Coming back down through the middle and on the other side. Last time, changing now to cow gazes at the moon, hands out just slightly, swinging around and a little bit higher. You're going to end up looking towards the corner between your hands, so the moon will up there somewhere. Good, and then your hands come down. Once again, doing the tapping exercises, starting to wake us up a little bit before we go into the standing posture. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And the other side. Upper part of the chest. Belly. And your legs. Now, resting your hands down and just pushing your heels up. So this is a good exercise for just getting the blood to go through your muscles again. But another aspect here, which is really to do with, our feet are on the ground. They're not just sinking into the ground, they're actually using the firmness of the ground to push up with, push up against, really. And then going, taking your knees round in a circle. And likewise, notice how you're just naturally using the contact with the ground to make this movement work. Through your feet, maybe through your hips a little bit as well. And back the other way. Okay, and then standing. Remembering as always that you can use the chair or wall for support. And when I'm going to move my chair out of the way, not because it's all that I don't need the support, but simply because it's going to be in the way. It's not just a case of whether you need the support. Sometimes it's quite interesting to use the support because it gives you an opportunity to focus a little bit more on some other aspects with it. So if you're trying to do, say, the step in, for instance, which we'll do later, you can do this, but every now and then there's going to be a little wobbling. And if what you're trying to do is to really investigate and play with this one movement, then if you keep wobbling around, you keep getting distracted by it. So it's not just about sort of if you need the support, it's about what the support can offer to all of us. Now standing. And again, if you are feeling a bit sort of wobbly or a bit uncertain, standing next to the wall can help to take that away, which means you can begin to focus more on your actual posture. So I'm going to come forwards though. So again, the ground is supporting you, of course. Your legs and feet are supporting the weight of your upper body. Your back is supporting the front of your body, this slight sense of dropping down. And really, you could think of the medium, if you like, through which your weight moves down towards the ground, which is what it's doing, has been predominantly the skeleton. Again, this is an image. It's not meant to be an accurate anatomical description, but it's something to encourage us to get, just as when we were sitting back in the chair. I encourage you to think about how it felt in the chair. We want to encourage ourselves to find that support within, rather than this kind of hard shell that we often carry with us. And we want to be able to use the ground in the way that I was just describing. So sideways first. So when I sink my hips down, I get this stronger feeling in my legs, which I then push against, push up, and then sinking down. Sometimes people say to me, can you do Tai Chi in water? Because we use the image of water a great deal. And actually it's quite difficult to do that because we don't sink down in water. We do a little bit, but actually the water pushes us straight up, which is a good indication of the feeling of this upward energy from the ground, but which makes it very difficult to root down in my experience, especially if you're in the sea and there's a few waves around. So it's given that the rooting down has to be there for Tai Chi, whether seated or standing. Actually, the simple answer is that you can't do it in water unless you can find a way to get your feet on the bottom and to keep them there without constantly having to. It's almost the other way around, isn't it? You'll be fighting against the upward surge of the water. Now, bringing your hands around and once again rooting down. Don't take your hands too far from the body. Sometimes we find ourselves that hands are sort of out there. That can strain. I sometimes find I start off like this with my thumb, and then with the upward movement, my little fingers almost brushing against my body. But as I get into the movement, and as the energy, the momentum builds in my arms, does it go out a little bit further? But just be wary of that, because what you don't want to do is say, oh, well, I'll hold my hands out there, because then the shoulders will be tight. It's a kind of natural process, shall we call it. Change into the wild goose. Now here, obviously the hands do go out to the sides, which is one of the reasons why it's a little bit trickier to keep that feeling of softness in your shoulders and your arms, up and back. Excuse me. And then part in the clouds. Okay, and shake out. So keeping the width of your step forward about the same in length, and once again, give yourself a chance to really feel the posture, feel the ground beneath your feet, and then use that awareness of the connection there to begin to move your body. There's always going to be a downward movement. Now, we could either think of that as a deliberate, I'm going to push against the ground. There's nothing wrong with that. But a slightly more subtle way of thinking of it is actually, once again, the leg gets compressed. And then when it expands, it pushes in both directions. And what we want to do is to feel that movement coming up through the legs. And our intent is for it to move us into to me in okay, I'll start that again. We want to take the sense of the movement, the energy coming up through the leg, and have the intent for it to go through the pelvis and then down in the other leg. In this exercise, when we come to bring the arms into the movements, obviously it's not just about the legs, but the legs will remain the foundation, the transfer of the weight. So we want this to become a kind of regular, everyday, habitual movement that we don't have to think about too much from moment to moment. But this is your opportunity to actually think about it, of course. If you push your back knee forwards, the back hip drops and your heel comes up. And if you can drop your front hip now when your weight's in the back, that will draw your toes up. So earlier I was saying about when your hips drop into the chair, there's a kind of sense in which your shoulders are being drawn down towards them. As your hip drops, it triggers the beginning of the stepping process. So that's quite important, because rather than getting here, and I often see this, we can easily find ourselves doing this. You see how my head has come forwards because I'm kind of, I'm going to lift the heel up. That can happen. I get to here, my hip drops, and this happens, and the heel comes up with the front foot the opposite way around. It's almost like if you could imagine somebody has come along and they've just pushed down through your hip like that, and you can see my toes are coming up there. You wouldn't want your shoulders to go forwards under those circumstances. And then eventually, of course, you can begin to step. I think sometimes, rather than thinking of stepping, just get to here and think, okay, so I'm going to contract my back leg, and then I'm going to expand it. So the thinking about the movements, investigating the movements, we change our view of it, we can learn more about it. No one idea, no one image, no one sort of method is ever going to encapsulate everything. So if we can try different things out, some will work, some won't. There's always a bit of trial and error. And shake out. But what we're trying to do, of course, is to, in a sense, to change how we view the movement. Because if we can change how we view the movement, then how we apply our intent will change. So feet in width apart, a comfortable length of step. Initially, just looking for that sense of pushing against the ground. So we also begin to get a sense for the ground. And I think this is also something which is, for me, really lovely about Tai Chi, is this feeling that we're connected to the landscape around us in one way or another. It's quite interesting to try this on different surfaces. If it was a very soft surface, you'd get much more of that sense of sinking down. But if it was a hard surface, it would be different. And so if it was flat or bumpy, it would all be different. raising toes and heels, sinking your hips. So doing this on sand feels a bit different to say doing it on floors that you're on. Try it next time you go to the beach. And then stepping in. And then step through. And then step back. Take your time. This is not a race. So, you know, this is your opportunity to each step come back to that. Oh, you know, what does it feel like with having the ground beneath my feet? What does it feel like with that support? Change direction again. Then you know, we don't have to rush this. So you take the step, you can bring your foot in, and you can stop here, you can stop there, and so on and so forth. And then the other direction. And bring your feet out. Okay. So now we want all those ideas to kind of run in the background, the ones that have worked for us, because as we start to bring our arms in to the movement, then we want to feel the effect of that movement, that energy in the upper body as well. So let's start with one of the simplest of all, which is fisherman cast the neck. Start on your back foot, hands hanging down from your shoulders, using whatever image, whatever idea work good to propel yourself forward, and then just feeling your arms being drawn through. Same thing as you go back. And just beginning to feel through your back, your sides, your shoulders, the front of your body, changes permeating your body, areas expanding and contracting. Feeling that initial surge from the ground, like being in the sea again, and suddenly feeling there's a wave coming in and it's about to pick you up. And that's when we start to feel the movement, the energy that will come from that contact with the ground and so on, beginning to find its way into our upper body in one pattern or another, depending on the exercise. As we've done many times, there's all sorts of ways that we can develop this kind of movement to change the pattern of movement in the upper body. and arms. And the center of the body now becomes very important. Before I was talking about our intent, moving the energy forwards and backwards, the upward energy. But there's more to it than that. If we come back, you settle in your back foot, and as you settle down, you turn towards the front foot. You can feel where your arms are being. It's almost like there's a suggestion here that the arms will move this way, and we just build on that. We feel the expansion through belly and chest and sides and back, and then moving forward into the front leg. Same idea. Wind blows the willows. Now, if you're familiar with these movements, then of course the changeover is very smooth. We get to know, oh, it's wind blows the willows, you know, we have a memory of that. But don't let that make you complacent about the movement. And, you know, I often discover new things about the movement. Good, and then shake it. So, same thing on the other side, fisherman cast the net. I quite often discover new things about the movements when I'm teaching them to beginners. Because, you know, looking for ways to describe things, looking for ways to get ideas across means that I have to really think about it, and I have to notice what I'm doing. I've done this movement so many times that I could probably do it in my sleep, but that wouldn't really be doing it. That wouldn't really be helpful, useful. So when I'm trying to sort of get an idea across to a group or to an individual, I'm always looking for ways. And sometimes there'll be things going on, and I think, well, I haven't actually noticed that bit before. There's always a bit of an adventure, to be honest. Do one more of these. And then sit back and turn. Wind blows the willows. This time, bringing the step in, bring the foot in, step forward. Dragonfly skims the water. As my front foot is slightly turned out. And what I could do, I'll bring the foot in if I'm feeling confident with this, is raise the leg. But what I don't want to do is to get to here and then sort of spoil it by going, oh, I'm going to try and raise the leg. If I don't feel stable enough, I won't do it. And then stepping back. So all these ideas bring us back to a central feeling. I like the term central equilibrium. You know, get to here. I want to feel the support of the skeleton. I want to feel the support of the ground. I want my attention there. And this is a really key thing. When I lose that focus of attention, that's when I'll start to wobble around. I'm far more likely to lose that stability when I'm teaching a class than when I'm doing this on my own, in fact. And then, okay, go back to your chair. I suppose the only exception to what I just said would be if I'm trying something new. But if I'm doing an exercise like dragonfly skims the water, and I can focus fully on it rather than have that sort of exterior focus as well. So all the way through the Tai Chi, with this rhythm of expansion and contraction, there's the idea of coming back to something, and this is really important. You know, we expand and contract, we push out of the ground, we sink, we sink back in. So we move out of that quality of central equilibrium, but we always come back to it. And so it's not that moving out isn't important. As I said earlier, a sense of the landscape around us is something that can come out of Tai Chi. And we have lives that we live, and things that we do, and things going on in our lives, and so on and so forth. But the last exercise, Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain, really demonstrates that rhythm and the value of it, that the coming back is important, and it's something that is often overlooked. So it's one of the reasons I always finish with this exercise. So Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Open your eyes. Thank you very much, everybody.